tonight we've got Andy Stewart, and Andy Stewart is there somewhere. He keeps, there he is, found him, yep, down there. Good on you, Andy. Now, Andy is from the Mill Studio, which is on the Bass Coast in Gippsland, and he's going to expound on virtual group musical collaboration and other pandemic opportunities. Andy is a bit of a legend. He's had over 30 years' experience in a wide range of both international and local audio-related fields, and including as a magazine editor. He's also a writer-contributor and has the golden era of audio production, bringing both musical passion and performer insights, which is very important, and having an ear for detail and no fear of the new and exciting. He's presently redefining recording with the ISO booth. Andy also tells us that he welcomes questions, but can you hold those or use the chat facility for those? Can you please take full advantage of that and welcome Andy for what I believe will be a very interesting session tonight. Thank you, Andy.
How you going, Graham? It's very strange to hear everyone clapping but not hearing anyone clapping. So yeah, thanks for having me. It's very strange to be sitting here in silence from what I can see. So maybe a few people can turn on their mics and interrupt me as soon as possible.
Give you some mood music, Andy.
Yeah, we need some mood something.
I'll make some noise too.
Yeah, Russell.
Rhubarb.
I hope my audio's okay. I'm not like
clear.
David. I don't have a U87 to skite about, but I do have a Rode Podcaster. But yeah, so yeah, please everyone open their microphones because it's. I know it's chaotic when more people have got their mics open, but it's more interesting.
We'll give you some room tone.
Yeah, otherwise I'm just sitting here in a CFA building in utter silence, which is very odd.
You turn the siren on?
I'm interrupting, but if I can interrupt, Andy, we did a rehearsal, very brief. But Andy, you should explain where you are giving this presentation from and
Absolutely.
why. I've got little kids at home, so having a Zoom meeting this time of night is a exercise in disaster. So I'm down at my local CFA house where I'm a lieutenant, and it's nice and quiet here, provided there's no turnouts.
No,
yeah, there is. I've got my helmet handy, and I'll be I won't be disappearing. Someone else might be. There might be chaos behind me, but I very much doubt it. Yeah, so I'm here just because it's there's decent NBN and there's peace and quiet. But currently there's so much peace and quiet, it feels very odd. So I don't know who hasn't turned their mic on yet. I can see who hasn't. Fabio's half asleep on the couch. There's 2 screens worth of people here. Is that right?
Oh, no, it's
Yes.
amazing.
Yeah.
I think it's about 3.
Okay.
At least we got the NBN.
Yeah, that's right. That's brand new as well. So hopefully it works. It's designed to be, the firehouse is designed to be a command center if it had to be. So it has to have a reasonable NBN connection. Yeah, so look, I'm in true Andy Stewart fashion. I don't have a too much of a planned conversation tonight. Hearing what Graham said there for a second was quite funny. The ISO booth. Well, I've got an ISO booth, but I've always had an ISO booth. So it's not really vastly different. But certainly, I don't know if anyone amongst the group here has been recording in this bizarre time we live in. But certainly my experience of it has been that we've just been making it work as best we can. And sometimes it hasn't changed much, actually. Certainly where I am, I'm lucky I'm not in the stage 4 lockdown here. But a lot of people I know who I'd be working with are, so it's been quite tricky. There's been a lot of, I've done a lot of holding people's hand, getting them to record at home. A lot of people who, you know, do record at home, they still don't seem to sort of get a few basics. So I've been doing a lot of talking through the basics over and over and over again with people. Yeah, but so the recent song I've done, I'm actually in the middle of an album that's quite a big record at the moment, but the first song off the album has been a big, ended up being, ironically, a big choir that had to be done basically, you know, with everyone in lockdown. So I basically sent out 100 emails, 150 emails maybe to people. I wrote a big long letter and then I customized it for each person slightly. So I didn't just send out a group email. I sent out individual emails over and over and over, slightly variations on the original letter I wrote. Because some of those letters were going to managers, some of them were going direct to artists, some were going to people I knew well, some of them were people who were complete strangers to me. So that all had a bit of a influence on how I wrote the letters to people. But basically I was writing this letter to get a lot of different people to sing this 2-part harmony that on this song I was working on with Kutcha Edwards. And so it was quite weird to do that from the point of view of that conversation not being just like a live conversation across talkback or, you know, in the same room as someone. It was actually, you know, broken in time because I wasn't going to be with them when they did it. So this letter was really the conversation I would often have with people, you know, in a studio, in a letter form, which was quite odd. And then I created 2 mixes of the song, which I put on Dropbox. And the mixes the song was quite skeletal still. There wasn't a lot of final recording work done on it yet. It was still quite basic. And we just put a couple of backing vocals onto the track, quite loud in the mix, as if, you know. So I went into the overdub booth in the studio and sang to it, and then also tried to sing along to that to hear what I would instinctively expect people would want to hear as a you know, vocal overdub tracking mix. So I had just had 1 backing vocal per file so that people wouldn't get confused about what they were singing, and basically the plan was for people to just sing basically along with that backing vocal. And and the result is the song you might have seen online. I'm not sure if anyone has seen it, but that's the result. And it was pretty straightforward in the end, really. There was no there was no start point for people. I mean, I sent people the file, but I couldn't control where they started recording. So when I got files back, they were just, you know, some of the files started at the start of the song and some of the files started 5 seconds before the chorus. And so basically the whole song has been manually aligned by me as I got the files. And that, you know, if you guys have done much work like that, that's actually pretty easy. There's not much to it, really. It's a pretty quick process. To the outside, untrained eye or ear, it seems like a daunting task, but it's not really. I just aligned each file as it came in about 10 seconds, and that was it. So, but no one's saying anything. I'm still talking to the silence here. So yeah, a bit of laughing, that's good. Anything, frankly.
How many tracks did you have?
The whole song is about 220 channels of audio.
Wow.
But but I bounced a couple of things down actually. So when it was mixed, it was about 180, something like that.
Andy, did you give people any guidance about microphones and acoustics or anything like that?
I did in some cases. Again, that was the thing. I was trying to craft these letters and then subsequent emails to people because I got I must have got 1,500 emails over the course of the process. But some people were very savvy and didn't really need any guidance. Other people, what was interesting is I also got people to film their recording session for the video. And it was fascinating to see how many plaster walls were behind the microphone. Mostly there was no acoustics, hard surfaces, pretty horrible, really. I was joking last week when we had this test run of this Zoom meeting that one of the singers who he was a bit of a budding audio engineer. He was keen to, had his new mic and pop shield and everything, had it all set up and everything. And when I got his files, they were slammed, like they were really clipped. And I kind of put it to him later. I said, because I didn't really have much time to talk to each person individually once they'd recorded. It was too late at that point. But I said to him, to Brett, I said, yeah, your files are very hot. You need to turn your preamp down. It's like, and he said, and so he went away and checked. And then the next day he got back to me and he discovered that even though he'd been singing into his nice new condenser microphone, he'd actually been recording via his laptop mic. So the file I got was actually the laptop. With God knows what normalizing or compression, I don't know. But yeah, look, so some people required a lot of sort of guidance and coaxing, and some people required, nothing at all. I recorded, the only person I didn't record at my place was Paul Kelly. I went up to Melbourne and recorded him. A bunch of people came down to my place, and then a whole bunch of people just recorded at home. Judith Durham recorded from her bedroom, where she's in isolation. And I had a weird experience with her because she's very sick. And but I was really keen for her to play on it, and she was keen to do it. But so I recorded. I sent her. She's a bit of a Luddite, self-confessed Luddite. Didn't have internet access. It was proving to be almost impossible to get her involved. But in the end, I sent her the 2 mixes that I'd done on a CD, mailed to where she lives, including a pair of headphones. And then when we finally got to record, she rang me on my mobile, which I had my mobile DI'd straight into Pro Tools. And so she had headphones on and listening to her CD player with one ear slightly off, and then holding the telephone and singing down the telephone to my mobile. And that's how we did it. So not very, the opposite of high tech, really. But it got done, and that was the main thing.
She has a beautiful voice worth capturing.
Yes.
Yeah, and just the knowing her that she's on it was half the thing, really.
Yeah, an old trooper.
Yeah, totally.
I just watched her anthem.
Yeah, right.
7 years ago. It's great.
Yeah, she's an amazing singer. If you ever sort of doubt how good she was, just check out she sang at the Mayan Music Bowl for Rock Quiz like 10 years ago. Has anyone ever seen that? It's just, she hadn't sung for years apparently. She just got up and sang that. Just absolutely nailed it. It's amazing.
She's got a voice like a bell. She's got that beautiful tone in her voice.
And just a total pro, just huge amount of experience. So I had a very funny experience she was quite sort of, I don't know how to describe it. She was just hadn't done it for a long time. So she was very nervous about doing it, especially in that circumstance. And so I had several phone calls with her where I was sitting at the piano at my place, playing her the melody and singing down the phone line. Now this is the melody. I'd go over it and over it. That was very surreal, but it was, but we did it. So that was the main thing.
Right.
And she's apparently been quite, restored by it. She's kind of woken up again. So it sounds like
Oh,
she
good.
might do some more recording. We'll see.
We all wish you well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another
So
album in here, do you think?
has anyone else been recording much in the last few months?
Just Zoom meetings.
Yeah.
Oh, and Andy, have you used any of the remote collaboration tools like Audio Movers or Connection Open? Any of these plugins that allow you to bring in the musicians into your session?
I haven't really, because that circumstance, there was just too many variables to, so in fact, that process ended up being quite old fashioned really, just because there were so many people involved of various age groups that as soon as there was any kind of technological impediment, you were just going to lose half the people. So in the end, I knew that most people who I was communicating with could record somehow, even if they just sang into their phone, frankly. And I just knew there was going to be enough people involved that, if there was varying fidelities, it wouldn't really matter too much. The group was going to hide any shortcomings in the odd, dodgy vocal, that's for sure. But yeah, no, I haven't really, I know a few people who I've worked with a little bit lately have. Some people get right into that. I find it a bit strange still, that stuff. So yeah, there was nothing was done live, that's for sure. It was all very offline and slow. I spent quite a bit of time trying to get Robert Cray to play guitar on it as well, and he's in Santa Barbara in California, and he was keen, but he was moving house and he was terrified of catching COVID in the US. So in the end, we just kind of left it for now. He might play another song on the record in the next few months, possibly. We'll see. Yeah, so it's the song's been quite a it's been fairly successful already so far in certain circles, and it's pretty early days for the record still.
I had a look at it today, and it's a fine recording.
Yeah,
Really is
likewise.
good. Yeah.
I'm glad you've seen it. That's good.
47,000 views or something like that. Quite.
Oh no, I just don't think it's that many, is it? Unless you've seen it somewhere else that I don't know about.
Could be wrong.
Yeah, look, it's the funny thing is it was all like, apart from the the backing vocals that people did at home, the whole thing was kind of done at my place. The whole video as well, even even lighting the fire in the paddock, that's on my place as well. So that's quite funny.
Did you do the video recording yourself, or did you have someone come in to do it?
No, there was a guy who lives quite locally to here, who's got a red camera, and he's a proper filmmaker. So he came in with dollies and assistants, and so it was quite a big deal really. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. I acted as the driver for most of it, driving around the farm in the mud. Yeah. So, but yeah, it's been an interesting. It's been a very weird few months for recording, that's for sure. It's been very slow, is what it's been. The hardest part has been trying to keep people safe and get work done in reasonable time. Apart from the fact that I've had 2 kids homeschooling, it's been fun.
Just an update. The sorry to interrupt. 11,714 views. I'm just looking at it online right now.
Yeah, cool.
Well done.
Andy, I bring up an experience from the opposite end of the telescope with the radio, as Greg Siegel would also know.
Yeah.
And at the lockdown, our studios were closed. Nobody could use them. So every program had to be produced from home. Not too bad here. My OSO booth is approximately 12 foot by 12 foot by 12 foot, all hard surfaces.
That must sound nice.
Yeah, well, it's in a brick house and it's quite quiet, and I have a wall full of cupboards. So I just opened the cupboard doors at varying angles and got a mixture of dispersion and absorption and trapping. So I haven't done it at the moment, but close working to a microphone helps.
Yeah.
And an M88 with a K&M screen in front of it sounds very good. You can hear it online if you want to. But my war story was trying to get another member of the program team to pre-record his programs. He had a laptop and a mobile phone.
Yeah.
And getting the CDs was the worst part. It was a late night owl. So we eventually ended up using DunlopNet. You drive the CDs to my place about 2 o'clock in the morning and put them in the lead box. That was the baseline, and the voice pieces he actually did using a voicemail using the Samsung phone, which sounded atrocious. It needed EQ like you wouldn't believe, but we got there. And then I gave him a USB mic set up with an SM57 and a Lucy, or Technica del Arte Mikey D, which he found a computer he could plug into and send those messages. And he tended to over-modulate a bit. It got a little bit close charging the microphone. But we did about 10 or 11 programs that way for him as well. So it's a catch as catch can, but I have to say that the end result still sounded quite okay, and it's just one of those things in community radio, AM community radio, good old fun mono makes life a lot easier.
Yeah, well, that was the thing. The thing I was quite surprised actually at how good some people's recordings sounded. And seeing how they were recording, I was thinking, oh, that's surprisingly good. The key was that I was, because there were so many voices, and because the nature require was wanting to be relatively ambient anyway, it didn't really matter that there was going to be a bit of ambience. I didn't compress the hell out of everyone, which would have just made it much worse. The actual choir is quite, in the end, unprocessed. I mean, I did this thing where to keep, just because I kind of run on instinct when I record and mix, you know, if I get someone's file in, I would instinctively deal with it on the spot. Bit of EQ if needed it, high pass filter, a bit of compression, bit of sibilant control if necessary, done. You know, and I did that, you know, 100 times. And then there was no group bussing, compression. That many voices just tends to compress itself, basically. So, and you know, the collective ambience, I then just pretty much just put it in a big hall ambience anyway. So it was surprising. I've had a lot of people ask me about it, thinking, "Oh my God, it must have been so complicated. It must have been so, you know, a bit of a head spin to deal with it." But in fact, it's quite straightforward, that kind of process. A lot of it is quite, it just organises itself in many ways. One thing I found fascinating was how many people still don't seem to understand, you know, when they're recording a vocal, particularly if they're at home, that most of their ambience is coming from behind them, not from behind the microphone. And so I in a few cases, getting back to someone else's question there a little earlier, I got people to, when they were really desperate, they're like, "Oh, we've got nowhere to record." I would say, have you got a closet? Have you got like big closet in your bedroom? They're like, "Yes." So it's like, okay, go to the closet, open them up so that all the clothes are revealed, and then put your back to those clothes and face the mic straight at them. And that works really well because you're basically trying to point a directional mic at the deadest thing you've got. And there's a lot of I think I blame I think there's a lot to be said for those these things that people sell that are basically an isolating thing for your microphone. So you've got a condenser microphone. It's in cardioid pattern, and you put this big thing around the back of it that you can buy, and they help, but they reinforce this myth that the problem is at the back, and the problem is not at the back. The problem is in front of the microphone. So there was a lot of people, some of them who've been engineers for 35 years, I might add, who seem to be kind of stunned by that bit of information. So they'd never thought of it. So,
Andy, did you have any difficulties with synchronization? We assume that the devices that people are using for recording now are all crystal controlled. Did you ever have any tracks that slipped and needed a bit of time correction?
No, not really. There was the recordings were fairly haphazard at best. So whatever there might have been in the way of slipping, that was more than exacerbated by them just being out of time anyway. So I did a lot of I did a lot of just quick cutting of people. So there are a few people who were just, one line would be delivered early, next line would be delivered late, the next line would be, So the worst of those I cut up a little bit and rejigged in time. But most people were pretty good like that. The song's quite slow, which tends to make people deliver things early, if anything, usually. People, when they're anxious, they tend to, be ahead of the beat rather than behind it. So there's quite a bit of that. But that's pretty easy. Just shuffle it about.
Andy, you're talking about a song that you've recorded. A few of us have seen it and like it very much, but there may be some in the audience who haven't seen it yet. Do you have a possibility of showing it to us?
Is there someone else who might be able to do that, who's a bit more with this Zoom meeting, Bizzo?
I've got a copy of it. I can roll it here.
David was just looking at it a minute ago, apparently.
Yeah. No, I'll roll it from here, Andy.
Okay. I just didn't want to bore anyone.
Thanks, Peter.
6 minutes of audio that they may not want to see.
It's worth hearing.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Two chats come in, Sandra and Xavier.
Yes, Sandra said it's hundreds of singers, and Xavier is a cool tip, and Xavier noticed the choir was more muffled. It's nowhere near as muffled in the high definition version.
The question is that to simulate backstage singing or to make them blend better is his question.
Yeah, look, the main singer is the choir's quite clear, but they're not the lead singer. So when I mix, the focus is always on the lead singer. So he's quite clear. But I think you probably need to have a listen to it, not via a Zoom meeting.
It is the stereo that gives the impression of space. And the definition of both the low and the high frequencies is actually quite good. This Zoom thing is heavily compressed and it concentrates in the mid-range. There are also some dropouts. It's pretty horrendous. But at least we know what you are talking about. But if those who haven't seen it yet go to the Zoom, to the Facebook example, you will get quite a different impression. It's very much better than you heard just then.
It's actually YouTube, Rod, not Facebook.
Oh, okay, YouTube. Peter, if you could put that on the meeting report, that would be fine.
Yeah, that link will be in the report.
Thank you.
I guess for rights issues, we won't actually be including the video in the report or in the recording, but
no, the link is fine.
We'll have a link there so that whenever anybody goes to it, at least they'll get a credit for the view.
That's it.
Question for Andy, I see, from Lilith, our newest committee member. Huge project, Andy. What was the time frame you made it in? You probably mentioned this earlier.
I think the whole thing took probably a couple of months. By the time it was written earlier in the year by Kutcha. He and I had a few sessions where we just sat and played guitar and omnichord, which is an instrument that he and I both play. Don't know whether anyone knows what an omnichord is, but it's one of my secret weapons. Yeah, but once we started tracking, we did a few people down my way who play on the record. We did some basic tracking of some acoustic guitars and a guide main vocal, and then it was a case of sending out the letters to people and getting them involved once I decided that that's what we were going to do. And then, we had to keep being musicians. There was a lot of excuses of why the dog had eaten their homework. So we had to keep extending the deadline so that we didn't lose people. But basically, as we went, I was kind of mixing it. I played drums on it. So I added those quite late. And then kind of, by the time I actually went to mix it, it was kind of half mixed already, actually. So I probably spent, I don't know, maybe 8 hours on the mix, but in the end, because a lot of the work had been done. There was stuff to do, but there was a hell of a lot of stuff that had been finished. So, yeah, probably was a couple of months all up as a process, I think. But it's been quite convoluted just because there was so many people involved, and the way in which they were involved was just, a bit ramshackle, and in the case of someone like Judith Durham, I must have made 20 phone calls before we actually got her to sing something. So yeah, it took a while, that's for sure.
You're doing a whole album. How long is that project taking?
It's ongoing. It's going to take most of the year, I think. It's been very much slowed down by everyone being in isolation, but also Kutcha being a 50-something Aboriginal man. He's right in the category of not wanting to get this illness under any circumstances. So he's been quite isolated. So that's been slowing things down as well. But yeah, there's been the last track we did the other night where we were all in the room together. We tracked a song live. No edits, no anything really. It's just a live take. So that's the exact opposite of this song. So there's all kinds of processes involved in this record, depending on the song. Some of the songs are big and really elaborate, and others are quite simple. So I've just got a Hammond C3 delivered yesterday to the studio, so I've been playing that today and getting ready to record that probably tomorrow, actually. So that's really amazing.
Andy, I noticed that you have a lot of outboard gear in the studio. I don't know if everybody noticed all the great studio shots in that video, but it was certainly a good view of what your studio looks like. Yeah. Is a lot of your effects with plugins, or were you using those physical outboard gear?
Both. I use both. I've been doing it so long, I really don't have any preconceptions of what I use and what I don't use. It's fairly instinctive. In the case of some of these things, more and more it's about being able to recall things endlessly, which is very frustrating if you're an analog recording engineer, because it's my idea of hell on earth is to recall an analog mix. But and so more and more I use a lot of digital plugins, but I've got quite a few digital effects and analog effects that are in the studio. I've got a really nice AKG Spring that I use all the time. I've got a 480L which I use all the time.
Yeah, I saw the lark there.
Yeah, I use a lot of analog compression. But most of that actually, more and more, that is, all that gear is about the recording process more than the mixing process, ironically, now. I use, there are times when you need 20 compressors when you're recording, but it doesn't happen that often anymore with mixing because a lot of it is done in the computer. There's no doubt about it.
Sandra has just asked how many singers needed until the individual tracks don't matter too much.
Yeah, you'd be surprised how much a bad singer pops up in amongst 100 singers.
Oh, I know. But my choir is small.
Yeah. Yeah, look, it's once there was more than 100. Actually, I should say that in that song, I've got it scaled so that when you first hear people sing it, a backing vocal, there's really only the very first time you hear other people other than Kutcha sing, it's just me and Archie Roach and Paul Kelly and about 3 other people. Second chorus, it's about 20 people. Third chorus, which is where the back of the song starts, there's about 40, and then there's about 60. So it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And the more I did it, the more I had people panned wider. So it was like I was trying to get the screen to just widen, or the image to just widen as it got bigger. I was worried that the song, was fairly straightforward and it needed some kind of shape. So you just couldn't have 100 singers right from the get-go, otherwise you'd be bored witless by the end of it. So there's really only that many singers towards the end. Basically, when he stops singing his main vocal is when they really kick in. So that's probably why someone might have said, oh, the choir's quite quiet, because it's actually not full strength until after he finishes his main vocal. Yeah, but I would say that you could have 1,000 singers in a choir, and if one of them is terrible, you'll hear them.
That's my experience.
Yeah. I used to record and sometimes sing with this group called the Wall of Men, and I recorded them quite a few times. And there was one day where I had a friend of mine who I won't name, and he was there to be one of the singers. He's also an engineer, and I had a stereo pair up to record the choir. And no matter where I put him in that choir, in that image, he just stuck out like a sore thumb. So, yeah, it's it is a problem. It's the one thing that's the benefit of a multi-track choir like that, is that if there's someone you don't like, you just turn them down. So, and because they're all in isolation, you don't have to tell anyone whether they're loud or not. So, yeah, it was quite funny like that.
Andy, Jim Barber here. I've got a question, sort of broadening out the direction a little bit, but supplementing on what you've been talking about. The track sounds terrific. I'm just wondering, you've got a lot of outboard preamps in the studio. You've got a terrific Neve console, which has great preamps in it. A lot of studios are going for a lot of outboard preamps and things. If you get a great performance on a good mic, does an outboard preamp really add anything? Is there any, or is it just?
That's a good question. I would use the Neve preamps on the console every day of the week, basically. I use, funnily enough, most of my preamps are all Neve, whether they're in the console or out of the console. I've got a few other things. I've got a couple of Telefunkens and a couple of Quad 8s. I used to have 19 of those. I've only got 2 now. It depends. It depends a bit on the microphone. I think often I'm trying to, more and more I find when I'm recording, particularly vocals, that I'm always trying to match the microphone to the singer. But actually, a lot of the time, it ends up being one of, you know, a handful of mics every time. It's not, you hear people talk about, you know, oh, matching the microphone to the singer and blah, blah, blah. But actually, more often than not, I am yet to hear my U67 sound bad with anyone in front of it. So there's some mics that just are really great no matter who's singing into it. But sometimes a preamp can make something sound a bit harsh. So I'm always trying to try and find a way to make, you know, somewhere from 2 to 5K sound nice and balanced. Never get harsh, never get strident. So that's the trick. But yeah, look, I mean, I'm spoiled because the consoles preamps are so good. They really are fantastic in that console. They're very solid and very clean and incredibly quiet. That I'm kind of spoiled. I don't really have any preamps that aren't, you know, don't have good headroom and don't have nice, you know, face coherent tone. So, but you know, I've recorded albums with a Mackie console and used nothing but that console's preamps. People love those records.
Yep.
They sound fantastic. And if I'd told everyone that they were all Mackie preamps, they'd probably hate it. So yeah, look, it has an effect for sure. But if you buy some of the good ones, then you can stop worrying about it. That's what I would say. That's for sure. There's some terrible preamps out there, but there's a lot of fantastic ones as well. There's a company called Warm Audio that make quite a few things these days, kind of copies of a few classics. And they've got really nice Neve preamp clones. They sound really good. And they're about 1/10 the price of a Neve. So I don't know how they do it, but they sound good. Yeah. Graham?
More questions?
I could hug the channel, but yeah, I've been doing the virtual choir thing because the choir that I would normally direct is, of course, not meeting. We're in Melbourne, and of course, lockdown and singing in a choir is deadly. So I had another question to do with the collecting all of the individual vocals and trying to get them to sound good together. I like some of my best singers are really quiet singers, and they seem to have sung close to the mic and it sounds like it's compressed almost, and some of the other ones sound like they're far away. How do you sort of get that to match nicely so that it sounds like they're in the same?
Yeah, well, look, it is tricky, and it's actually, if there was one thing that I'd wished I'd said more about when I sent the letters out to people would have been their attitude to singing, not just getting the song to be, not just to singing in tune, but to singing with the right level of intensity. As the song got bigger, I really actually needed the singers to get more fired up. And some people just did that naturally and other people did not at all. And so there was a tendency for it to be a bit flat. So what I did was and it was partly choice, partly, you know, necessity, is I kept some of the ones who were really fired up for last, so that when they did come in, they were, you know, they made a significant difference to the sort of attitude of the back of the song. Because, but that was definitely the problem with the lockdown choir and this whole idea of doing things remotely, was that it was, it's just really hard to be able to explain all of that stuff in writing, especially when you're not sure of what the outcome is going to be, actually. So it's a bit like potluck. You get what you get, and then you just make it work. A lot of it was just about, you know, prioritizing people in volume more than just about anything. You know, if someone was just not cutting it, then they were just down lower.
Yeah.
So, and what I did towards the end is I also automated a bit of, just automated a few people, not many, but I just made a little bit of effort to just shape the back of the song with a few people, just a few moments that a few people sang, to just make it pop out tiny bits. So it's like, oh, you can hear that that's Emma Donovan. Oh, now you can hear Paul Kelly. Oh, now you can hear Bob O'Bundle. And you never hear them for more than like one line. But it just gives it a sense of a bit, that it's a bit more, there's a bit more intensity there. There's a few people who really sang with huge, like Emma Donovan's got a huge voice. And she spoke to Kutcha on the phone one day, and he really gave her a pep talk about really going for it. And so she's singing like the full gospel soul, you know, super take. She's a great singer. So she sounded fantastic. But yeah, like there's a few people, do you know Lisa Miller? She came down and sang at my place, and as did her sister and did her sister's daughter. So there were 3 Millers down at my place one evening. And those 3 women sound incredible together. So they've since come back and they came back then and did a second harmony, which ended up being a third harmony in the song that we just worked out on the spot that night. So that's also towards the end of the song, to just give it a bit of difference as the song travels towards the end. Yeah, so there's a lot of subtle changes in there that aren't really designed to be too audible, but they just keep the thing pushing forward, you know. But you're right. I would love. I haven't probably given enough background to this, but I had planned on recording an actual choir in the Awaki Auditorium, and on the very day where I rang someone up at the ABC to organise to get that ball rolling, the ABC closed. So I couldn't have picked a worse day to start the plans. And but yeah, I would much prefer in many ways to have been in a room with people and be able to actually conduct them a bit, but it didn't happen. So we got what we got.
So Andy, if you were doing a similar project in the future, what, out of the experience you had this time, what could you do differently or improve upon or anything like that? How
well, I think the first thing I would do is I would be far less open to, you know, getting whatever I got. I would be a bit more calculating about being quite specific about, you know, the amount of intensity I wanted people to sing with here, and then, you know, to just be more conscious of what I might get if I said nothing compared to what I would get if I properly explained exactly what I needed. I'm kind of, you know, in that situation, I'm usually a bit of a fatalist. I'm usually trusting that the people I've chosen to work on it are good enough that they'll just instinctively know and not need to be told like I'm their school teacher what to do. But it's quite surprising how given people, you know, with no one there to guide them, all kinds of weird shit goes on. They do.
I guess that's why we have choir directors and conductors.
Yeah, I mean, I could only imagine it would have been a complete nightmare to have had all those people in the one space. And frankly, it would never have happened in a million years if it had actually been a real occurrence. I could never have had those people come together on one record. You know, because there were literally people driving 500 miles across the outback to get to a microphone, that kind of thing. So there's quite a few people out on country who drove from like central Western Australia across to Alice Springs to go to a radio station where there was a microphone to sing that backing vocal. So there was something quite amazing about having written those parts, sending out the email, and then knowing that out there all across Australia, there were all these people singing that track. It was fascinating, really. It felt great, actually.
Andy, in a project like this and any reconsideration, would you think about how you would use the guide track a little bit more creatively?
Yeah, well, look, that was the other thing, is that the guide track was still quite basic when we sent out the song, because we were, if we were going to try and wait till that's actually one of the reasons why the harmonies are what they are, is because the main vocal hadn't been recorded yet. So normally what happens with a backing vocal is that, you know, for the most part, they adhere to a main vocal somehow. You know, that they're empathetic to whatever that main vocal is, no matter what it happens to be. So because we didn't know what the main vocal was really going to be, or at least we certainly didn't have a finished main vocal, what we chose to do is basically have a call response kind of vocal. So the backing vocal has its own structure, almost irrespective of the way the main vocal would ultimately be delivered. So that was handy. That was like the first decision we made that was like, oh, right, this is how we do it. We do the backing vocals as a separate point in time, and that really helped. But yeah, certainly, look, you can always do things better, and I've been making jokes to Kutcha already that the next song we put out, we're going to get 150 people to sing on it, and he's been like, no, don't do it.
Well, did you think of the idea of a multi-part, a progressive backing track, that as people contribute to it, you send out a new copy to those who are going to make the downstream contribution?
I actually did that with a few people.
Bad idea.
Towards the end, actually, a few people did get to sing on a more advanced version of the song. I actually used there are a few people who I think were a little bit skeptical of it. But once I sent them a mix where there were 50 other people singing on already, suddenly they were in. So, safety, I think it was a safety in numbers thing, really.
Well, it's a different discipline getting soloists to sing as part of a group and to match intonation. And you put a whole 150 soloists together and want to make them into a choir. It's maybe herding cats is the phrase that comes to mind.
Yeah, it is a bit like that. I had a funny experience with Paul Kelly, who was I recorded him, and I just got Archie Roach's files, and Archie had really delivered the line very differently to how I'd asked him to. But it sounded fantastic, so I thought, okay, well, rather than try and fix this or ask him to do it again, and I actually, when I recorded Paul, I got him to sing, sing it like I wanted him to sing it, and then I also got him to do a take where his delivery was like Archie's delivery, so that Archie just wasn't on his own doing that. And then I went into the studio and did one as well. So then there were at least 3 people singing in that other sort of slightly weird timing. But yeah, it's quite tricky getting lead singers to do anything by the book, that's for sure. But look, a lot of the time they're fantastic at it. Lead singers are a very broad bunch. There's some who are incredibly capable of being very precise and really great with, instruction. If you can give them precise instruction, they'll follow it to the T. And then there's other people who, they just couldn't sing a backing vocal if their life depended on it. And I don't quite know what part of a singer's brain is absent when they can't do that. I've never really understood what makes someone not be able to sing a backing vocal. It's quite odd.
Chris Ludwig, you had a question.
Oh, I just wanted to make a couple of observations, Andy. I'm really looking forward to watching it on YouTube, because I haven't heard the track before.
Yeah.
But I'm usually on the other side of the microphone actually playing. I've got a 7-piece jazz band called the Syncopators.
Yeah.
And this Stephen Grant, the pianist, is a sort of a self-taught audio buff, and he's been stitching these isolation videos we've been making during lockdown. And I'd be really interested to get all you guys' professional comments on it. I think it's come out really well. So can I send that to Peter and to send it out to the link to our YouTube channel to have a look at it?
Have you got it on a site somewhere?
It's on our YouTube channel, yes, we've just started.
We can put that up just as the address. I think that'd be okay.
Sure.
Where's Peter? Oh, there you are.
Yeah. And the other observation is that Judy Durham, the fantastic friend of mine, and had the good fortune that she sung with the band a couple of times. One going back way down to about 25 years ago when she was married to her late husband, Ron Edgeworth. She sang with us at a concert in Perth, and she sang at our 25th anniversary as well, the Syncopated 25th anniversary. And I think that was probably the last time she sang in public.
What year was that? Very lucky.
That was 2004. Sorry, 2014.
Right.
Andy, I don't know whether the audience believes that you're in a fire station.
What's that?
Can you turn the camera around to show them that it is in fact a fire station that you're in? or maybe turn the lights on, though. I'm
sure they believe it's a fire station. I can't move my laptop tonight.
Okay.
Because it's tied to a microphone and a big screen, and you can probably see over my shoulder if I point there. That's a fire truck right there.
Yeah, we can see through the window.
Yeah, that's good. Over your left shoulder.
Over my left shoulder, yeah.
Are there any more questions from the group?
I've got a few questions. No one else has been doing. Are there many people in the AES group recording full time at the moment, or is there not really anybody?
There's AES members who are recording.
Yeah,
certainly.
I've been doing a little bit of mixing, Andy, but no recording because I can't really access the studio, and in Melbourne. Yeah, we're kind of not allowed to go in there, and my house is not soundproof, so that's a bit frustrating. But just playing plugins and doing mostly in the box stuff.
So, do you normally not mix in the box? What do you mix with?
Yeah, I usually do, and tracking is mostly where the analog action is. As you said, with your front end, with compression and preamps, and depends where I'm doing it, but. Yeah. And occasionally, I might print an analog reverb or something on the way in, but most people want recall and it's all kind of.
Well, that's it with recall. It's almost not even a thing anymore, is it? It's just it's an assumption that's made.
An assumption that you can access.
Always.
You can read.
No understanding that there's even. Sorry, I'm just. I'm getting called.
Should we be thanking you now, Andy, because you're about to start?
Okay.
Well, there's your proof, Graham. He's in a fire station.
I don't need any more proof. Well done, well done.
So you might find that any minute now there's going to be people arriving.
Andy, now's the opportunity for everybody to turn their microphone mute off, and certainly thank you for taking the time and the effort for giving us a very interesting session tonight. And
no worries. Pleasure.
Showing us how we do it here under lockdown. So you've got your microphones unmuted. Let's all thank Andy.
Thank you, Andy.
Thanks, Andy.
Thank
you.
Thank you
very much, Andy.
Works better under Discord. Thank you.
Thank you. Check out the song, and I'll see you all again soon, no doubt.
Fantastic.
And I might have to fight a fire. Quite literally.
We better let you go. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.